Have you ever stood by the ocean, tasted the salty spray on your lips and wondered what would happen if it all just changed? Imagine a world where every single drop of ocean water, from the deepest trenches to the sunlit surface, suddenly became as fresh as a mountain spring. This seemingly magical event would not be a gift to a thirsty world. Instead, it would trigger a cascade of disasters that would unravel the very fabric of life on our planet. To understand why, we must first journey back in time, billions of years ago, to a younger Earth where the oceans were not yet the salty bodies of water we know today. Our planet's oceans, which cover more than 70% of its surface, were not always saline. About 3.8 billion years ago, they were vast expanses of fresh water. So, where did all the salt come from? The answer lies in a slow, relentless process that has been happening for eons. As rain falls through the atmosphere, it absorbs carbon dioxide, making it slightly acidic. This acidic rain falls upon the land, slowly eroding rocks. The water then flows, carrying dissolved salts and minerals from the land into rivers, which act as cosmic conveyor belts, delivering their salty cargo, piece by tiny piece, to the great oceanic basin. Over billions of years, this process has continued without end. Rivers keep adding salt, while water evaporates from the ocean surface to become rain again, leaving the salt behind. It's a one-way trip for the salt. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor and underwater volcanoes also contribute, spewing more dissolved minerals directly into the water. The result is an ocean so salty that if you could somehow remove all of it and spread it across the land, you would create a layer of pure salt as tall as a 40-story building. This vast quantity of salt is not just a feature of our oceans, it is essential to their very function. This immense accumulation of salt has shaped the evolution of life for countless millennia. Every creature that calls the ocean home, from the smallest plankton to the great blue whale, is exquisitely adapted to a saltwater environment. Their very cells are built to manage the high concentration of salt around them. They have developed complex biological systems to regulate their internal water balance, a process known as osmoregulation. The salt is not an inconvenience they must tolerate. It is a fundamental component of the world they were born into, and the only one in which they can survive. Changing this would be like changing the laws of physics for them. The moment the oceans turned to fresh water, a silent, catastrophic event would sweep through the marine world. For the countless fish, sharks, whales and invertebrates, this change would be an immediate death sentence. Their bodies are designed to live in a salty environment, constantly pushing excess salt out to maintain a stable internal state. When surrounded by fresh water, this process would violently reverse. Fresh water would rush into their cells through osmosis, trying to balance the salt concentration inside and outside their bodies. Their cells would swell, bloat, and ultimately burst, leading to catastrophic organ failure and death on a global scale. The devastation would not spare the foundation of the oceanic food web. Consider the vast, invisible forests of phytoplankton and underwater algae. These microscopic organisms are responsible for something truly profound. They produce at least half of the Earth's oxygen through photosynthesis. They are the lungs of our planet, floating in the sunlit upper layers of the ocean. Like the larger animals, they are completely adapted to salt water. A sudden shift to fresh water would be just as lethal to them. They would perish almost instantly, their tiny forms unable to cope with the osmotic shock, leaving the ocean a sterile, lifeless soup. The consequences of this mass extinction would ripple outward with terrifying speed. With the phytoplankton gone, the primary food source for countless creatures, from tiny krill to giant filter-feeding whales, would vanish. The entire oceanic food chain would collapse from the bottom up. An eerie silence would fall over the seas as the estimated 228,000 known marine species, and perhaps millions more yet to be discovered, would cease to exist. The oceans, once teeming with a vibrant diversity of life, would become a planetary-scale graveyard, a silent testament to the delicate balance we had disrupted. Beyond the death of animals, the loss of these photosynthetic algae would have another dire effect on our atmosphere. As they died, their ability to absorb carbon dioxide would disappear. Not only would our planet lose a major source of its oxygen, but the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air would begin to climb unchecked. This would dramatically intensify the greenhouse effect, trapping more of the sun's heat. The planet would begin to warm at an accelerated rate, setting the stage for the next phase of this global catastrophe, a complete breakdown of our planet's climate system.
Perfect.
Our planet's climate is regulated by a powerful unseen force, the global ocean conveyor belt. This is a massive, slow-moving system of currents that acts like a planetary circulatory system, carrying heat from the equator toward the poles and sending cold water back toward the equator. This constant circulation is driven by differences in water density. Colder, saltier water is denser and heavier, so it sinks in the polar regions. Warmer, less salty water is lighter, so it stays near the surface. The salt is the critical ingredient that makes this entire engine work, allowing the oceans to distribute the sun's energy around the globe. If the oceans became fresh water, their density would become uniform, solely dependent on temperature. Without the extra weight provided by salt, the cold polar water would no longer be dense enough to sink and drive the deep ocean currents. The great conveyor belt would grind to a halt. The warm equatorial waters would stay at the equator, and the cold polar waters would remain at the poles. The planet's heart would stop beating, and its ability to regulate its own temperature would be lost. The consequences for our climate would be swift and extreme, plunging our world into a state of chaos. Without the moderating influence of ocean currents, weather patterns would become unrecognizable. The regions around the equator, no longer able to shed their excess heat, would become unbearably hot. Temperatures would soar, leading to more frequent and powerful weather events like hurricanes, which draw their energy from warm surface waters. Meanwhile, the polar regions, cut off from the supply of warm water from the tropics, would plunge into a deep freeze. Ice caps would expand dramatically, covering vast new areas of the northern and southern hemispheres in a permanent, frigid grip, creating a starkly divided planet of fire and ice. This new extreme climate would make agriculture as we know it impossible. The delicate balance of seasons, rainfall, and temperature that allows us to grow crops would be shattered. The predictable weather patterns that civilizations have relied upon for thousands of years would be replaced by violent unpredictability. Regions that were once fertile breadbaskets would be tormented by relentless heat and drought, while others would be locked in a perpetual winter. The foundation of our global food supply would crumble, leading to widespread famine on a scale never before seen in human history. The collapse of the marine food web would be just the beginning of our troubles. Humans rely on the ocean for a significant portion of their food. Billions of people depend on fish and seafood as their primary source of protein. In our freshwater ocean world, this resource would be gone overnight. The global fishing industry would vanish, and coastal communities that have built their economies and cultures around the sea for generations would face complete ruin. The sudden loss of such a massive food source would place an impossible strain on land-based agriculture, which would already be failing due to the chaotic new climate. Humans, along with every other land animal, would also face a direct threat to their survival: a severe lack of oxygen. With the oceanic phytoplankton wiped out, we would lose half of our planet's oxygen production. The air would become thinner, more difficult to breathe. As carbon dioxide levels continued to rise, without the ocean to absorb it, the air we breathe would become increasingly toxic. Life on land, which evolved in an oxygen-rich atmosphere, would begin to suffocate slowly. This new Earth would not just be inhospitable, it would be actively hostile to the kind of life that currently populates it. It's a stark reminder of our current reality. Even today, with our salty oceans intact, we face growing freshwater shortages. By 2025, it is predicted that a third of the world's population will experience chronic water scarcity, a problem that underscores the preciousness of this vital resource. The fantasy of turning the oceans into a limitless supply of fresh water ignores the complex and vital role that salt plays. It is the lifeblood of marine ecosystems, the engine of our climate, and an integral part of the planetary system that makes our world habitable. The salt is not a flaw, it is a feature. Ultimately, a world with freshwater oceans would not be our world anymore. It would be a planet reset, destined for a new kind of evolution over millions of years, one that would proceed without us. The salt in our oceans is a symbol of the intricate connections that bind our planet's systems together. It teaches us a profound lesson, that the elements we often take for granted are the very pillars that support our existence. The salty sea is not just a barrier to be crossed or a resource to be exploited, it is a fundamental part of what makes Earth a living, breathing world.